With Session Update, I'm Julie Bartke. On Tuesday, the Senate Environment and Energy Committee invited climate change experts to the state capitol. Here are some highlights from their presentations.
This is weather. Weather is CNN headline news. What we're talking about is the History Channel. I think it's baked into our DNA to look out the window and assume that this is the way it is everywhere. And I keep reminding people gently, the global in the term global warming. It's hard even for television meteorologists to keep that global perspective, and yet it's essential. People say, well, there's been no warming since 1998. That meme is ridiculous. You can cherry pick anything you want. Pick the beginning date, the ending date. Here's the reality. And yet, skeptics, and there will always be skeptics, just like there will always be conspiracy theorists. Well, no, look at this. Look at the slope. Really? I sat across from one of my heroes, John McCain, in 2007. We were honoring Iraqi vets, and I challenged him on climate change. This was back when just about everybody acknowledged that we had a potential problem. And I said, could this be a natural cycle, Senator McCain? He looked at me, he rolled his eyes. He said, Paul, I just got back from the Yukon. The village elder presented me with a 4,000-year-old tomahawk that just melted out of the permafrost. The odds that this is a natural cycle, slim to nil. We have not invalidated winter. We will see cold fronts. We will see snow. We are tracking a subtle slow motion transformation with global implications. You can't look out at your thermometer, but do look out at the new birds and flowers, the new shrubs, the things that are growing there that weren't growing there 40 years ago. Twin Cities Metro, much of southeastern Minnesota now in climate zone 5. And that is a recent occurrence. Everything is shifting northward by 150 to 200 miles. Lee Freilich from the U, from the Center for Hardwood Ecology, sent me this photo taken last year, March 27th, magnolia trees in full bloom, St. Paul campus of the University of Minnesota. And he said, Paul, this is a business as usual scenario for the year 2090, because I don't know what to make of this. So here we go. Winters, by and large, and there are exceptions. 96 was a tough winter. 2009 was a tough winter. But step back and look at the trends. Most of the winters are now shorter. Old man winter is losing some of his teeth. Fewer sub-zero nights. In fact, it was Mark Seeley who said that since 2000 we've seen a 4x increase in midwinter rain and ice. And the snowfall is sporadic. Used to be it would snow in October and snow would stay on the ground through late March, early April. Now it's a roll of the dice. Heating degree data, the greater the number, the colder the weather. We see a steady decline in heating degree days. We are spending less money heating our homes and businesses. These are the coldest temperatures in the metro every winter dating back to 1963. We used to get down into the minus 20s and minus 30s fairly regularly. Look at the trend. Now maybe it gets down to minus 5, minus 10, minus 15. Again, nighttime lows warming at the rate of about 8.3 degrees Fahrenheit per century. This according to the Minnesota Climate Office. Average ice out dates. The ice is not staying on our lakes as long as it did 20, 30, 40 years ago. Look at the trends. Lake Superior warming 3.3 degrees during the summer between 79 and 2006. So it's something of a paradox, but as Mark said, the forecast calls for increasingly hot and dry with more extreme rainfall events. The rain is falling harder, but that's a problem because much of that rain is not soaking into the soil where we need it. It's not soaking into our aquifers. It's not helping our farmers. And the fact that we are warming means that we are evaporating more water from our lakes. Keeping water in our lakes and in our topsoil and in our aquifers is going to be a big challenge here in the years and decades ahead. The latest climate assessment report, more frequent and intense Midwestern heat waves, degraded air and water quality, more intense rainstorms and floods, more stress on the Great Lakes. I have a hunch we will not be taking water for granted here in coming years, and increased public health risks. I close with a couple of quotes. This is one that resonated with me. I'm proud of having been one of the first to recognize that states and the federal government have a duty to protect our natural resources from the damaging effects of pollution that can accompany industrial development. You know who said that? Ronald Reagan, 1984, July 19th. He recognized we have an obligation to the environment and future generations as well as business. My point as a serial entrepreneur and a would-be businessman is that we're going to have to figure this out. And the faster we get past denial and get to solutions, the better off we will all be. Because mitigating climate change, building a more resilient Minnesota, is going to require a level of innovation and reinvention that is going to propel this state and our nation into a new competitive paradigm. There's no debate about the science in China, ironically, or Europe. We have to get past denial. There are nearly 1,000 references in the Old Testament and the New Testament to caring for God's creation. In Luke 16:12, man has been appointed as a steward for the management of God's property. Ultimately, he will give account for his stewardship. We are accountable. Native Americans have a great proverb. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our kids.
You've heard that scientists are really certain. I mean, 97% of the most active climate scientists agree. Why? Why do we know? Why have we known since the 1800s? Yes, that's when the first predictions of human-caused warming began. 1800s. Why do we know? It's not just that the Earth is warming. It's not just that our climate's changing. It's changing in the right way. These are called fingerprints. The fingerprints, the patterns of climate change tell us conclusively it's human caused. Let me give you an example. Many people say, well, the sun. John, the sun's getting hotter. That's what's causing it. It's not these greenhouse gases. If that were true, you'd expect days to be warming more than nights. We've observed the opposite. We've observed nights to be warming more. We're observing the poles, the North and South Pole, to be warming faster than the equatorial region. That's not consistent with a hotter sun. Finally, if the sun were getting hotter, we would expect the entire atmosphere to be getting warmer. We're not observing that. We're observing the bottom part of the atmosphere warming, the top part cooling down, because we're holding the heat down. So it's the pattern that tells us it's not the sun. And similarly, other patterns conclusively tell us that the warming is due to greenhouse gases. I measure ocean heating. 90% of the heat is extra heat's going into the oceans. Ocean water can hold a lot of heat. The oceans are taking up so much CO2 because of human emissions that the pH has changed. The oceans are becoming more acidic, less alkaline, if you want to be technically accurate. Why do we care? Well, we care if we eat seafood because changing pH of the ocean affects creatures that form calcium carbonate shells, the base of the food chain.
This is the 07 here. This is the Arctic Ocean. This normally is all covered with ice. 10 years ago, it would have been up to the coastline here in the summertime, but we had this large breakup right here. This ice also, not only are we losing area of that, we're losing the volume of it because it's getting thinner and thinner. It's the ocean here. And then on the Greenland Ice Cap, this is the Greenland. Greenland is the second to the largest ice cap in the world, 1,600 miles across. Some of you may have, if you've flown to Europe, The flights usually fly right over in this direction. Some of you may have seen Europe. If you fly to Norway or Scandinavia, you fly over it. But it's a huge amount of ice here, 10,000 feet at the very top here. What we're seeing here in 1992 was an average year, what we used to have an average. The red shows the thawing levels during the summer. In other words, the thawing levels here were only 800 or 900 feet. We can take a look at 2002. It's going up to 3,000 feet. That's 10 years later. Now notice how it accelerates here to 4,000 or 5,000 feet. And then we move forward here to 212. Last year, for the first time, the Greenland Ice Cap thawed all the way to the very top, 10,400 feet. This is very serious. Greenland now is emitting a tremendous amount of ice is going into the ocean. It's accelerating. And at first, we had a sea level rise from the warming of the warming of the globe was mostly absorbed by the ocean. And as the ocean warmed up, water expands when it warms. So we've had a sea level rise in the last couple of decades from this expansion because of the thermal expansion. But now we're starting for the first time to see the sea level rise that's going forward.
The public is reluctant to accept a problem until there's an obvious solution, and everybody wants a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet, but there is plenty of silver buckshot. Renewable energy, doubling down on energy efficiencies, making government buildings more resilient as well as energy efficient. The state can be setting the lead and should be setting the lead. And this is going to happen. I mean, in a market-driven economy, you know, can we dictate? Thou shalt? Or can we lead by example? This is a process. And I sense the tide is turning. And when people realize that they can do something good for the environment and their grandkids and save money, okay, that sounds pretty good. Going green will generate plenty of green.